Bayonetta.
I recall Jubileus destroying the moon at the end of the first game, but that was such an absurd moment the devs likely expected everyone to have forgotten about it. Actually, they probably hoped you'd forgotten the entire game, since Bayonetta 2 just rehashes every idea from the first game. Don't get too excited over this double crotch shot opening. Later we discover this is mother and daughter. Surprise fetishes either gross you out or awaken something within you. Did I boot up the first game by mistake? Because I could swear I've done all this before. First, an in medias res fight on top of a falling clock tower, then a narrator chewing the scenery, then getting distracted by the obvious Google Map background of a modern city existing 500 years ago. The only difference this time is that Bayonetta's outfit has changed and she's fighting alongside her mother instead of Jean, which doesn't even make sense because this is actually the same exact scene from the first game. It's like the game is aware that it's retconning itself and has decided to work the retcon into the actual fiction.
No one bothered telling me any of your kind survived.
This is an in medias res opening that we will be working our way back to over the course of the game, so you would think this is the first time these two have met each other based on the dialogue, but actually they fought several times before this, and Baldur's mask was already broken before this fight occurred. And furthermore, this scene will be completely different once we get back to it.
At least you're the silent type. The last sage I met spent 20 minutes rambling on and on.
Bayonetta would be great at sitting the first Bayonetta, though this line is supposed to be ironic because he's the same character from the first game. Imagine yourself as a kid in the 90s during the middle of the console war between Nintendo and Sega and trying to picture what kind of game they would make if they ever teamed up. Chances are it was very, very far off the mark.
You know what I need? Some heels without guns.
Considering that you were buying all this stuff for yourself, why are you having it gift wrapped?
If you weren't already lined up to go to Inferno, you'd be well on your way with all the shit you pull. Dressing up like a nun just so you could off some angels and keep the underworld happy.
Enzo will now provide exposition on the previous game as well as what happens to witches when they die, because that is totally not a thing that will happen in the next few minutes. If you were going to throw your packages on the ground, why even bother catching them when Enzo panic threw them into the air?
What's the matter with you? I told you what I'm after. A jet. I want a toy jet. You know, the kind with wings, flies in the sky.
This goes on for some time just so the game can sell the joke of an actual jet crashing through the toy store.
Do the pretty ribbon. Just hurry up and put it in the box, will ya?
It's not a great joke, but I admire their commitment to it. Originally, I wrote this sin for the pilot ejecting over a busy shopping district, but then I looked closer and saw that the seat was empty. No one was even flying this plane and no pilot bailed out. Why would the pilot seat even eject? So far, this game has started with a fight while falling from a cliff, a scene with Bayonetta and Enzo Exposition chatting, which is then followed up with a plane crashing into the city and Bayonetta fighting on top of it. I know aping the first game to the letter is intentional, I just don't see the point beyond being cute. The pilot ejected from this jet, then Bayonetta kicked it back into the air, ignoring the idea of the plane still being capable of flight after both of those things, and that is very generous of me to ignore that. I would still like to know who is piloting it. It's even flying between buildings. Despite this series portraying Bayonetta as a sex symbol, I can think of few video game heroines I would want to see naked less. Her impossible anatomy along with the Barbie doll featurelessness of her naked body make for a true moment of ugh.
This is why I never buy anything on sale.
Why did you ever switch back to regular pistols when you know they break after a few shots? You received magic guns in the first game for this very reason, and Rodin has to give you new ones again here. So how did Jean get on top of that other jet? It was ridiculous enough how Bayonetta ended up on this one.
It's not Christmas without caviar.
Is Christmas really the holiday you should be celebrating? I mean, you are killing angels as we speak, and as a witch, you have a contract with the demons of hell. Of all the things, that body check from a dragon is what kills Jean, someone who once survived a missile strike. Gravity sure is doing a good job keeping Jean's corpse glued to the side of that building after her soul was dragged to hell, taking with it whatever magic power her body likely contained. Considering that this game is backed by both Nintendo and Sega, it had to have a big enough budget to animate all the cutscenes, meaning these freeze frames are a poorly thought out stylistic choice.
Dead witches get dragged to hell. It is what it is. Jean's gonna wander Inferno suffering for eternity. Them's the breaks.
I didn't ask you to tell me what I already know, Rodin.
If everyone pulled guns on characters who exposit to the audience, games might finally figure out a more efficient way of getting information across.
You know, she's pretty hot for a dead chick.
I really have to wonder why Enzo was even allowed to hang out with Bayonetta, and have children.
But you'll need to reunite this with her soul if you're gonna try and bring her back. I figure you got about a day before it's game over.
Remember those words, because Bayonetta is about to fly across the Pacific on a single-engine propeller plane.
The sacred mountain of Fimbulventer. The joint's supposed to be the link between Inferno and Paradiso.
I'm still way more interested in learning why New England is part of Canada than I am this half-baked, half-borrowed Norse mythology. Once again, it would have been far faster to fly across the Atlantic instead of flying across the entire US, the Pacific Ocean, and all of Asia to travel to some city in Norway. And you only have a day, remember? Bayonetta is committed to those Sega references. She flew all the way here on top of the plane to pay homage to Sonic and Tails.
Sorry, Enzo. This is where I get off. Say hi to the wife and kids.
Since Bayonetta is flying the plane magically, why did she even need to bring Enzo? She could have rode inside. And why does Enzo even own a plane if he doesn't know how to fly? Whew. That was close. Another second and this game would have turned into one of those creepy animal cruelty porn videos you see on LiveLeak. If Rodin can teleport himself to Noaton through his portals, how come they couldn't send Bayonetta here instead of making her fly?
I'm here to help. Just make sure you don't bust a cap at my ass.
At least this time, they picked the right character to drop this line. The city of Noaton is a bit overinvested in reflecting pools. I can't see how anyone walks around this town without getting their feet wet. Loki is what would happen if you cast Jaden Smith to star in a Yu-Gi-Oh movie. Loki serves the same exact role as Cereza in the first game. He's a magical child from the past with a mysterious power brought forth to do something in the present, and he even meets his adult self later on. He also has amnesia due to his time travel, just like Bayonetta did, but still sees flashes of it on occasion and knows there is something he needs to do. Again, just like Bayonetta.
Silly girl.
If you're going to do the whole character shoots in direction of someone but was actually aiming for someone behind them, don't give us a clear view behind said person that shows that there was no one there.
You'll have to do better than that to earn a tip, my dear.
If this was Dante talking to a small child, he would never get away with that kind of innuendo. That is an awesome enemy design, but I have to wonder how he fights with that sword since it also serves as his head. Swinging it around is going to make him lose sight of his opponent and likely make him nauseous. There has to be a better way of removing debris from someone instead of shooting it off them. Perhaps a method involving your hands and back. Stuffing Loki while transformed into a squirrel down the front of your clothes is getting way too close to fetish porn for my liking. Also, Bayonetta isn't really bussy enough to be keeping anything there, and that Millennium Puzzle necklace Loki wears would also chafe like hell. Luka somehow stalked Bayonetta halfway across the world. How he arrived here is a mystery, since Bayonetta used an enchanted airplane, and Luka, who works for a half-ass magazine, would have to fly economy.
Our fates and our paths cross once again.
Sending Yuri Lowenthal voicing a reporter who swings around on a grappling hook in this game is going to be good practice for what's likely the next game I send. I cannot tell if Luka is supposed to be Italian, French, Spanish, or American cowboy in this game. Maybe it's just the clothes, but Luka's head looks way too small for the rest of his body.
The Overseer was the true creator, the true god of the human realm, the god of chaos.
So a villain that is supposed to be God that wants the power of the eyes that were given to humanity. Just like in the first game. I keep hitting on that sin, but what choice do I have? I could probably pull out my script for the first Bayonetta, change a few lines, and wrap this video now. Can you clean your plot visions up a bit? That's a bit hard to make out, possibly resulting in valuable information being misinterpreted later. I mean, why would a vision inside your head display on a projected screen in reality, and have film scratches? I have $10 for the person who can explain the transition between where Bayonetta and Loki were with where they are now. They were at the foot of the mountain. Then a giant vortex of water formed and Bayonetta rode it. Now they are in what I assume to be heaven. Then they fall back to Earth, and Loki survives by landing on Luka's face. And my brain can only handle so many chemical stimulants and my tolerance is not high enough to figure this one out.
Where's the mountain? Where's Fimbulventer?
It is impossible to miss the mountain. It stands out no matter where you look. Must have been the wind. I was going to send Bayonetta for not realizing this is Baldur due to him doing the exact same bullet catch move, but then I remembered that they changed Baldur's voice actor, and he now sounds completely different, so I'll send it for that instead. I get why a character named Loki can turn someone into a snake, but just because I understand the reason doesn't mean I have to agree with it. Bayonetta can survive in space. I don't think being underwater is much of a threat.
You can't let kids' jokes make you that mad.
You were actually drowning until the whole snake thing. How do you then turn that into a lol, fooled you? I was only pretending to be dead joke. I can't help but suspect that Loki likes watching Bayonetta pole dance, since I can't think of any other reason he creates these stripper poles for solving puzzles when they could easily take a different form.
I didn't go through all these ridiculous ordeals to just randomly show up in opportune places, you know.
That is actually what it says about you in your character bio.
I'm investigating an old Noah Toon story, known as The Legend of Aesir.
I think Luka writes for a less than reputable paper. This must be the tallest tower ever, because damn do they fall for a long time. Gandalf had already beaten the Balrog by the time this sequence ends.
Well, you were right about the shortcut, but I think they've sent a welcoming party.
Considering that you're underwater, this line should sound like, "You better run it like the shortcut, but I think they've sent a welcoming party." Also, both Bayonetta and Loki are underwater and can breathe just fine, which really calls into question that scene not long ago where Loki and Bayonetta almost drowned. They were swallowed by the demon fish and have been inside this Jabu Jabu level knockoff. How did you get inside to go after Loki? I give up trying to keep track of where these two are in relation to anything. They were traveling through some underwater cavern beneath the mountain. After being attacked, they fall from the sky, which is also the ocean, into some astral plane where the gates of hell are located. By sheer luck, Bayonetta ended up right where she needed to go despite trying to go in the wrong direction and being attacked and redirected along the correct path. At this point, all of the cool monster designs give way to enemies that resemble sentient bismuth.
Great plan, love. You can't be on your own, so let's go into the depths of hell.
Loki would be excellent at game sins.
The remembrances of time exist forever. Am I wrong, Lumen Sage?
Lopter sent Balder from the past after Loki by convincing him that Loki was the one who killed his wife, but Lopter needs Loki alive to claim his power. Had Balder succeeded, Lopter's own plan would be screwed.
You will return what is rightfully mine, what I should never have lost. The Eye?
The Eye.
Yeah, the Eye. Hear the plot point bell ringing? It always chimes twice when the writers think the audience is too stupid to understand. Main character loses in a cutscene right after winning the in-game fight cliché. Considering Lopter needs both of the eyes and Loki's power to become the god of chaos once again, how was he planning to make this work if Bayonetta never came to Fimbulvinter? She's here to retrieve Jean's soul from hell, and Jean dying had nothing to do with Lopter and his plans. It just sort of worked out that way.
But you may still forfeit it, like a lady.
No lady would ever hand anything to a man who chases after little boys.
It's even worse that that's a running theme in this series. I have to point out just how hard it has been for a witch who has contracts with multiple demons to get into hell. All of her power comes from here, and I assume she had to come here to get the demons to agree to serve her. But for Bayonetta, this is all a new experience.
Why, if it ain't Bayonetta, fancy finding a witch like you in a place like this.
Why, if it isn't Rodan, down here in hell because he can easily open portals to here from his bar. And why the hell couldn't you open one for Bayonetta and avoided all of this? Actually, seeing just how strong Rodan is, he could have come to hell, reunited Jean with her soul clock and bring her back to life and been done with this business in minutes.
Get up! Please, Sean!
Wow, even the soul of a dead woman can pull off the eyes closed but not actually dead cliché. If you take Loki with his Millennium puzzle box and playing cards, Enzo's cartoonish Brooklyn accent and Balder's white hair and magic eye, we have 3 of the characters needed for a Yu-Gi-Oh cosplay, and there is no way I can accept that this is a coincidence.
This is impossible!
I agree, but not for the same reasons. Loki was riding on Bayonetta's demon horse as it ran off into the distance while she fought Balder. Yet now he's right next to them so he can activate time magic for some reason and send both of them back to the past.
I know where this is.
Back in the land of reused assets from the first game. That's where.
You?
Your and you will be the only 2 lines spoken by mother and daughter during this whole time travel sequence. Despite knowing whom the other is, they don't take this opportunity to speak at all to each other. Time for a boss rush composed of the bosses from the previous game, which should change the future, since all these angels were still alive during that game. This was the clock tower we saw Bayonetta and her mother fighting on earlier, but now that we've caught back up with the opening, this scene is completely different. Balder is nowhere to be seen, and Lopter as a child attacks Bayonetta instead. Also, how are the Bayonetta and Jean from this timeline going to fight on the falling clock tower as they did at the start of the first game? Future Bayonetta and her mother are already on it. Bayonetta and Jean falling from that tower is literally what sealed Bayonetta away for 500 years, and now I have no idea how that fits into the timeline. This piece of rubble is still falling even while they have a long conversation on top of it. No cliff in the world is this tall.
I must be rid of them as soon as possible. I want what they have. I want back what is mine. The eyes of the world.
What?
The other me escaped to the future, and I can't let him have them. which is why I must see you eliminated, my dear.
Here's a major problem in Lopter's plan. He is the one who actually destroyed the Umbra Witches 500 years ago to get the left eye held by Bayonetta. But instead of going after the Bayonetta of this timeline, he goes after the one that was accidentally sent back. The past Bayonetta has the left eye too, and the Baldur of this timeline has the right eye. And rather than claim them, he lets Bayonetta sleep for 500 years and sends Baldur into the future to serve him there.
Girls passing out in front of me I'm used to.
That may be the creepiest thing I've ever heard someone say.
Well, I guess it beats addicting toddlers to lollipops.
Scratch that. That is actually the creepiest thing I've ever heard someone say. Lopter was really thinking ahead here. He killed Rosa in front of the past Baldur, then sent him to the future believing Loki was his wife's killer so he would serve Lopter in the present to hunt down Loki. Instead of taking the damn left and right eyes in this time period, he set up a plan to take them 500 years later. Why did Lopter even need to bring Baldur to the present to hunt Loki? He knew exactly where Loki was headed and has been waiting for him here at the top of the mountain the entire time. Baldur seemed to serve zero purpose in all of his plans.
Quickly! There's no time!
Yes, there is. You can time travel. That is the definition of having plenty of time.
We need to get to the sacred mountain now.
How can we reach that place? We are in Vigrid.
Vigrid is somewhere in France, according to the map montage in the first game, while Fimbulvinter is in Norway. Even with a jet, they would never make it in time. Also, Jean somehow predicted Bayonetta would travel through time and arrive back in the present here in Vigrid, and would need to get to Fimbulvinter in a hurry, so she grabbed a jet and flew from New York to Vigrid. Earlier in the game, Enzo mentioned flying a plane to the top of Fimbulvinter was impossible, so now of course they fly a plane to the top of Fimbulvinter.
Baldur, this is what I promised you. Your chance at revenge.
You need him alive. Why give Baldur another chance to kill Loki before you've even taken the sovereign power from him? I don't think I've ever seen a more "I'm the final boss" design than this.
Shall we illustrate?
Let's rock!
At least the devs only used one Dante quote this time around.
The real power of Lord Aesir, the god of chaos, is nothingness. The power to erase anything and everything from the world. Even the very eyes that created it.
I wonder how Lopter missed that little fact, considering he and Loki used to be one being that was the god of chaos.
Ceresa, listen to me.
You know my name?
Jean did yell it a few times during the flight. He probably heard it back then.
Call me Daddy.
I didn't know that it was possible to be kinky, creepy, and adorable all at once. Since Baldur sacrificed himself to imprison Lopter's soul and was flung through time, he eventually becomes the corrupted villain in the first game. But that would mean that he knows his plan in the first game is doomed to fail since he met Bayonetta while she still possessed the left eye. Enzo, who does not know how to fly, flew a single-engine plane on one tank of fuel all the way back to the US from Europe, and knowing this game, he likely flew across the Pacific.
Again?
Not only does it end where it began, it ends doing the same thing, with a plane crashing into a toy store and a fight on top of said plane. Question: since Lopter took Baldur's right eye from him, and then both eyes were destroyed by Loki before Baldur was sent back to the past to become a villain, how does Baldur once again have the right eye in the first game?